Hello! It is time to fill in some pages of my sketchbook. I've got so much to get through. Look at the size of this thing and I've barely scratched the surface. I better not waste any more time, so let's get into it! Here is an assortment of art supplies I'm going to be using today. Of course, this isn't everything because I ended up picking some more stuff as I went along, but I've got some dual tip brush markers here. These are the Kmart ones. I also have a set of acrylic brush markers, some pots of Cosmic Shimmer Pixie Dust, and my Derwent Lightfast pencils. So I'm getting straight in with this first artwork. Sometime in January, I found this large beetle in our garden. I looked it up on Google, and it is a cowboy beetle. The cats were playing with it, so I had to rescue it by putting it on a leaf and moving it elsewhere. I took a photo first, though, because it's such a pretty one. I didn't even know cowboy beetles existed until I looked it up, but I'm rubbing out my pencil drawing, and I'm going in with the Derwent Lightfast pencils. I was trying to do a fairly realistic drawing of it here. And I also hadn't used coloured pencils in this book before. The paper's pretty good with them, although I did find that the Derwent Lightfast pencils didn't want to layer as much as they normally do. I found that the best surface for Lightfast pencils is the Lightfast paper, but it's also insanely expensive, so I figured I would try them out in here. They worked okay, just not as well as I would have liked, and maybe that was just me. I was pressing too hard to begin with. That's a possibility as well, but I was able to get quite a lot of layering on here and build it up to something that I liked. It just took me a little while to get the hang of them again. It has been a while since I've done a coloured pencil piece, so that could be part of it, but once I started adding in the white coloured pencil over the top for a bit more highlight and shine, it really started to look quite realistic. And I'm definitely going to try some of my other coloured pencil brands in this sketchbook as well, because the mixed media paper does actually have quite a lot of tooth. In case you haven't seen my other videos, the sketchbook I'm using here is an Ohuhu mixed media book, which I bought off Amazon. I'll link it in the description below so you can check it out. I have actually painted the cover of it so it doesn't look like that. Normally it has a plain black front, and it is a hardback, so it's nice and sturdy. I'm really liking the book so far. The paper's holding up well to pretty much everything I've tried with it, except that it's a bit too thirsty when it comes to alcohol markers, so I've been avoiding using those ever since I tried them to begin with. My intention at the start of this year was to work on filling this sketchbook. So far I have not gotten very far with it, and it's already into March, so I don't know how I'm going to go with this book. At this stage I think it's going to take a lot longer than a year, but I'll just keep plodding my way through it. I don't think it really matters when it gets done, as long as I'm making some art. I'm drawing in the leaf here, and I also drew in the shadow shapes because the sun was shining that day and you could really see the shadow underneath the beetle. I've just put the leaf in rather than my thumb holding it because I just didn't really want to have that bit in the drawing itself. I think the beetle on the leaf just on its own is perfectly fine. The shadow part is making the beetle look quite 3D, also because the leaf at this point isn't very well rendered and the beetle is, so it just makes it look like it's standing out in front of it. It did have all 6 legs, you just can't see them all from the photo that I took. I think 1 or 2 of them were hidden underneath the body of the beetle. I'd forgotten how slow it is to do an artwork with coloured pencils. I've done a lot more painting recently, and that's just so much faster than pencils, but it was quite nice getting back into them, and I enjoyed drawing at this picture. It's a very limited colour palette because the cowboy beetle also matches the leaf pretty closely. The leaf was a bit paler in real life, but I just ended up using these colours because I liked the look of them. And I think the whole thing has turned out pretty well, although I was sitting here thinking it looks quite stark on the white background, so I grabbed out an extra supply. These are my Schminke watercolours because I had them on the desk from a previous video, and I'm just chucking in an abstract background using different green paints. Even though this isn't watercolour paper, the watercolours actually flow really well across it. You can see there are a few little tide lines there, but that's also because it's not cotton, and I don't mind that. I also did some lettering, some faux-ligraphy, not calligraphy, and I just wanted to do this because I knew I would forget what kind of beetle this was, so I thought I would add in the lettering to the picture, and then I'm just going around the whole leaf with a white outline, along with the letters, just to make them stand out a little bit more, and here is the finished picture. I'm really happy with this one. I love the colours, I think my pencil drawing looks really great, and I'm quite proud of this one. What do you think in the comments? Do you like a beetle as a subject, or are you afraid of them? I apologise if you are, because I've just made you watch this whole thing. At least it's not a spider. I really hate those too. For the opposite page, I have a fine mist sprayer, and I really wanted to try out some of my Cosmic Shimmer Powders, which I've had in my collection for quite a while, but this pink one is brand new. I was in a craft store recently, and there was only one on the shelf in a colour that I didn't have, so I just decided to buy it. Once you spray water on them, they just really activate and go crazy. They have a pearlescent shimmer to them as well. You can see the paper is buckling because I've added a lot of water here. Once it dried and I'd closed the book on it, it did eventually straighten out again. There were still big clumps of powder on the page, so I've just grabbed a brush and I'm pushing it out into the water to make sure everything dissolves. There's another product out there called Brusho, and I think that's pretty much the same thing as this. This next one I think is called Straw Gold or Straw Yellow, and it's a lovely shimmery gold colour once you start adding on the spray. I was spraying it in the wrong direction. I was trying to figure out what I was doing there. But honestly, I had no idea what I was doing with this page. I was just chucking on the Cosmic Powders to see what I could achieve with them. But at this point, I was thinking I might have ruined the page directly opposite my lovely cowboy beetle. And you can probably see there I've got that piece of plastic that comes with the book actually laid over the top of that page to protect it from any splatters, because I figured that was probably going to be very likely with this crazy, unpredictable medium. And the last colour I have in the shimmery range is an emerald green. This one's an absolute stunner as well. I'm really glad I bought the red one because it goes nicely with the other two colours. It's almost like a primary set, because even though it's a green colour, it's a bluey green, and I think all three just look lovely together. Although I don't really know what to do with these powders. They're just so unpredictable, and it's really more for abstract kind of things. I think it's more for making mixed media pages and backgrounds anyway. Let me know if you know what these powders are used for. I have absolutely no idea if they're Lightfast or not. I'm guessing probably not, but that's okay because they're in a sketchbook and it's not going to get that much light anyway. Oh gosh, I had water everywhere, and I was just putting something underneath the book to make sure it was nice and flat. I've got this other one called Fireworks, and for some reason I thought this was a shimmer too, but it actually isn't. Or at least my one doesn't seem to be. It looks black, but when you spray it, there's all these other colours in it. It's such a strange one. But it does give kind of the look of fireworks when you spray water over the top of it. And it's just pure chaos, as you can see here. So I was just painting this one out a little bit as well, looking at it thinking, what on earth am I going to turn this into? Because right now it's just a complete mess. But what is a sketchbook for, if not for some experimentation? They all look very pretty together, and if I ever see any more of these Cosmic Shimmer Powders, I might considering buying another few colours. They are really fun to play with, and I'm going to have to do some searching online to see if I can find anywhere else that stocks them other than my local store, which does not have a website. If nothing else, it's very relaxing dabbing out these shimmer paints in water and just seeing what effects you can get from them. I decided to finish here, I let everything dry, and now when I hold it up into the light you can see how shimmery they are except for the black one. But they're so pretty, I love them a lot, and they just create some really interesting effects. Up here especially you can really see how this fireworks one is living up to its name, all of the colours that have come out of that black. It's fascinating. But I just felt like it needed something else, and I wanted to relate it somehow to the cowboy beetle, so I'm just doodling in some more little beetles over this side, picking out shapes in the blobs and kind of turning them into imaginary beetles. I wasn't looking at any references other than what I'd drawn on the right hand side there, so they are pretty messy and probably not anatomically correct whatsoever. I guess I've indirectly made another reverse colouring page here if you saw one of my previous videos that I just did recently. and I can't decide if I made a mess of this page or if it looks good, so I'm going to leave that decision up to you. You can tell me in the comments what you think of it when I finish it up, but it was really fun, and I like that this page is now loosely related to the other side, but I couldn't have picked two more contrasting styles of art to go side by side. One is quite realistic and the other is about as unrealistic as possible, a very abstract piece. But that's alright. I like trying out different techniques, especially in a sketchbook, and I'm not one to do the same style of art every single time because I get bored with it very quickly. I know there are some artists out there who are amazing at what they do because they do the same kinds of art every day and they have just mastered it completely. I'm not that kind of person. I do not have that attention span. Sometimes I wonder if I have undiagnosed ADHD with the way I flit from one thing to another. I've always been like that, and as I get older it becomes more and more prevalent. It could also just be that I just want to try everything and experience as many different kinds of art as I can. Variety is of course the spice of life, but I guess it means that I'm probably not going to be an expert on any of them. I can live with that. I am enjoying my art journey, eclectic as it is. I think I mentioned it before, particularly for this year, I've just been wanting to experiment and enjoy the process rather than necessarily the outcome. It's the act of creating that's far more important to me than making some masterpieces which hang on walls for hundreds of years. I don't think this particular one's going to be famous in the future, or even now for that matter, but I had a lot of fun doing this one too, and it's another interpretation of beetles. I'm finishing off with a few white pen highlights. I decided to leave some of the colour patches empty and not fill the entire page with bugs. I went minimalistic here, if you can call it that, but here is the finished page spread, and I actually really like how it turned out. Two totally different artworks, but they were both really fun to do, and it was nice just to try out a few different art supplies in my stash. Lord knows I have enough of those. Now it's time to flip over the page and start a new page spread. I felt like I wasn't finished with these Cosmic Shimmer Powders yet, and I wanted to push them a bit further to see what else I could come up with them and see if I could make them a little bit more controlled. The fireworks one doesn't shimmer, but these three do, and I wanted to explore this a little further, but we'll get there. Firstly, I just want to paint the background, and I'm going to go across the page. Here's another supply I didn't show. This is a cloverleaf palette, and it has a smaller set of Sennelier paints in here. I really wanted to use that Payne's Grey and maybe a couple of the blues. I wasn't too sure, so I'm just going to work it out as I go along. I've picked up a big brush here, and I'm painting very loose watercolour across the entire page spread with a base of the Sennelier Payne's Grey, and then I'll add in a few blues as well. Now, I didn't want to go to the edges of the page because I just knew it was going to warp the whole thing to an uncontrollable level, so I've kept it as a loose rectangle with a white border around the edge, and I will deal with that later. Now I'm throwing on the fireworks powder first because I want that to be part of the background. It's not very shimmery, but you can see all of those colours that come out into it, and that's just blending in with the Payne's Grey, and I was able to get some really interesting effects just letting the water run around over the paper and gently brushing most of the powder just to make sure it had dissolved, because I really didn't want big chunky bits in there, which will probably flake off once it's dry. Using the big brush kept my strokes loose as well, and I think it's creating a really interesting effect. I added in a bit more Payne's Grey, and of course I've just got so much water on here. I did actually use the paintbrush dry to absorb some of that water. I've also dropped in some Indian Throne Blue, I think it is, or it might be Ultramarine, just to make it a bit bluer, and then I just mucked around with the brush for a while, not really thinking too hard about where I was going to put it. This is where I had dried the brush on a rag, and then I was using it to absorb some of the water and paint, particularly in the spine. Here is what it looks like when it's dry. You can see the Payne's Grey has done quite a big drying shift, but I decided to leave it like this because I really like how patchy it is. Now I've just got this cheap palette, and I thought I might be able to control the powders a bit more if I shook them into a palette and then mix them with water so I create a paint rather than throwing them directly onto the paper, and this actually worked out really well. You can see how nice and shiny that paint becomes. And you only need a few drops of water. I had to add in a bit more powder to make that thicker and look shinier. So I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? Well, I think I'm just going to paint circles onto the top. So it's kind of like planets in a galaxy or something. It's another abstract piece. But I just wanted to see where it would take me when I just started painting circles over the top of some of the background. The shimmer paint I made is quite translucent, so you can see the background showing through, but I really like that look, and the circle looked lovely and shiny in contrast with the matte background, so I figured I'd mix up the other two shimmery paints and continue painting circles on there. Just using the same technique, shake in a bit of powder, add in a few drops of water, and stir it up thoroughly. I have no idea how permanent this is going to be, but it seems to be holding onto the paper really nicely, like I'm not getting any powdery residue or anything like that. Once it's wet, it does seem to stay like watercolour paint rather than reverting back into a powder when it fully dries again. It's interesting. It does re-wet in water though, so I don't know what it is, but it's working okay. I didn't use any gum arabic or anything. Maybe it's got gum arabic in a powder form mixed into the shimmer powder. I really don't know. These are magical powders as far as I'm concerned, and as long as they work, that's all that matters. I wasn't working to any particular pattern here. I was just trying to make sure colours didn't sit next to each other. That's about the only thing. And then once I'd filled up the page with larger circles, I added in some smaller ones too, and kept going until I was happy with my rather strange looking galaxy. I think it might have worked better if I had a darker background, but I didn't want to lose all of those fun colours in the background, which is why I left it as it was. I felt like it did need some more randomness to it, so I am just chucking the powders straight on as I did in my previous picture, because I also want to make some starry, galaxy-like looking things. I don't even know how to explain that, but you could probably see what I mean as I'm painting them out, that kind of nebula thing that you see in those funky pictures of space. I've lost all of my words there. Sometimes when I'm doing a voiceover, it's so super difficult to explain what I'm doing in my pictures. Like up in the corner here, I made an absolute mess. That wasn't supposed to happen, but in the end it actually worked out quite well, and I just ended up chucking on some more powders because for some reason I'd stuffed up that particular circle. But I'm just going to say that that bit was totally intentional. And of course I'm adding in white pen highlights because I can't help myself. I have to add them to everything. It's just something I end up doing. It makes it feel like the picture's finished. And then I drew in some little stars just to try and tie the whole thing together and make it look more galaxy-like. I could have used white paint or white ink and flicked it on, which would have made it look a little bit more natural, but I honestly just couldn't be bothered looking for white paint or ink, so I'm just using the pen and trying to randomly drop the stars in at different sizes as well. It actually ended up looking pretty good, I think. And just to finish the whole page spread off, I'm going around the edges of the painting with a thick black pen and just making a bit of a border. I think this just brings it together as a full page spread, and I really like the jaggedy edges. I'm going to have to do this more often. I think I really love this look, rather than it being too neat, you know, when you tape it off and everything. I don't have much luck with tapes and books, so I'm just going to do it the jaggedy way. I really love how this turned out. It's so shiny. I can never be sad when I'm looking at shiny things like this. Magpies unite, as one of my lovely viewers often says. And she's not wrong there. But that's another page spread down on the sketchbook. I'm really happy about that. Flipping over to the next page, but you're going to have to wait for part 2 because I had a whole drama with this page spread and you're going to see what happened. It's a long video in itself, but here's what I did today. 2 page spreads. This eclectic beetle one. I think the cowboy beetle is my favourite artwork of the day, although I do like the shininess of the other one too. And then flipping over, I have this lovely shiny cosmic galaxy. I'm also really happy with how this one has turned out. The accidental part in the top left corner looks really great as well. Hooray! If you want to see what I've got on my next page spread, stay tuned for part 2, which will be coming out next week. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd love a thumbs up, and you might want to click subscribe so you don't miss out on part 2 next week. Here's a couple of other videos to watch in the meantime. I hope you're having a creative day with your sketchbooks, and I'll see you in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!